Hey, Sunshine, how are you? Happy Friday. It was not. And I forgot to tell people. So we came in, so Tessa Vale and I did a live together on Wednesday. Hey, Jules. And I couldn't get it to stream on both TikTok and the tubes. So yeah, so there was no tube show. Kaiser, I've got a couple of science fiction stories for us tonight. What? You fell asleep? No, that never happens. Hey, Amy, how are you? Welcome, welcome. There we go. Hey, Timothy, how are you? Hey, music, how are you? Welcome, welcome. Got a couple of good stories for you guys tonight. Hey, Jasmine, how are you? Hello over there on the tubes. The tube stream is up tonight, so hey, Queen, how are you? Yeah, it's been, it was, I think, like 95 today. And the humidity was bad enough that it was like freaking 105. Oh, awesome. I'm so glad you got it. That's fabulous. That is fabulous. I am super happy. Hey, Marcy, how are you? Oof. Yeah. It's been raining a lot, too. Like, we got thunderstorms quite a bit. Which kind of sucks because it's making the grass grow too fast. I can't keep up with it. Oh, I love a good thunderstorm. So I'll tell you guys a quick story. When I was hey, what's up? How are you? We're doing some science fiction tonight. So the when I was little, we lived out towards Utica, Albany, in New York. Hey, Linda, happy 4th. Hey, Eddie, how are you doing? I suspect we're gonna get a thunderstorm tonight, so hopefully won't lose power. But so my parents had built a house that was up on a hill, and it looked out over the valley. And when there was a thunderstorm, it was like you could watch, and it would be the thunderstorm going through the valley, and lightning and the clouds and the rain. And my dad and I would sit out on the back porch, and we'd watch. And Ticonderoga I've been there so many freaking times. Yep. So this one night we were out watching, and my dog was a collie husky mix named Sheba. Wonderful dog. I miss her even to this day. But she had this tree that she loved to sit underneath, and it was a little way out. She, poor thing, lightning struck the tree, and we didn't even see more than this brown and white blur that went between my dad and I's chair through the screen door and skidded underneath the couch. Yeah, she didn't go outside during thunderstorms after that. She wouldn't even come out on the porch with us. She was freaking terrified. We didn't even, there was just a blur and just pow. Oh, Lake George is wonderful. I have a good friend of mine that goes to Lake George every year. So how do I select my stories? So I actually have purchased on Google Books these anthologies that are 99 cents, and each one of them has 25 stories in them. Some of the stories are public domain, some of the stories are not. But I also I have anthologies of some big writers like Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov. And what I do is I list them all in a catalog, basically a spreadsheet, and I can go through and pick them based on the word count. And so with the word count, I know how much time it'll take me to read them, and so I can kind of program them by that. And then I have a list of keywords based on internet searches for those stories, and I can pair them that way. Or I can just pick them at random. But some nights we do a single author. We do a couple of stories from, we've done Ray Bradbury, we've done H.P. Lovecraft, we've done Stephen King. So, hey Trista, how are you doing? Welcome in. All right, well, it is 9:10, so I think James Patterson. I knew that was coming. So, hey, good evening, Ray Toe. How are you? All right, so I think it's time to get started. We need some Dr. Seuss. Well, see, Edward, and for those of you that are here and see Mr. Edward Baker VO, he's a fellow voice actor, writes and voices his own stuff, and go check him out because he does some great stuff. And I actually was very privileged to be a part of a project that he did during Christmas last year. It was so cool. But as far as Dr. Seuss, I actually have a Dr. Seuss book ready to go that I'm going to be doing during I'm going to do a picture book night on a Sunday. A particular Vikram, let's hear it. So there is a woman that comes in on the family-friendly nights, and she brings her neighbor's granddaughter. And Marley, the little girl, she actually requested, asked if I could read Llama Llama Red Pajama. Well, I happen to have a copy of that because I read it to my kids. So I have a handful of picture books that I'm going to put together a picture book night for. And I'll make sure she's there so she can see it. That's like one of my favorite things to do, is to be able to interact with little kids when they come in on a family-friendly night, which is not tonight. Yes, corduroy's on my list. So it'll be Llama Llama Red Pajama, corduroy, probably Green Eggs and Ham. I will do a book that I love called Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. There is another one that I enjoy, stuff like that. So, yeah, and that's coming. I just haven't planned it out yet. So, but this Sunday we're actually going to start reading the BFG by Roald Dahl. Vikram, if you want to DM me, that's totally cool. I have a couple of Robert Munsch books on there on my list. So, do I prefer? Well, it's hard to say. I think long-term strategy will be to grow on the tubes, but TikTok has been very good to me. In the last year, I've gained like 18,000 followers just from doing this, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I will never abandon TikTok unless they abandon me. So, hey Tessa, and how is the post-birthday girl? Were you I need a potion of healing. All right. Well, geez. Yes, we love TikTok, and we love the TikTok shop. Hey, Tina, welcome in. I was just about to start. I'm glad you made it. All right. Well, let me get started. So we've got 2 stories to read tonight. Plenty of time to chat in between and afterwards. I like to be able to do that now. I don't want to pack the evening so tightly that we can't chat. And for those of you that were here on Wednesday, we will be doing another guest live, probably also with Tessa. It was a lot of fun, and we just had such a good time. So, thank you again to Tessa for coming on and sharing your talent with us, because you are the awesome. And it was your birthday yesterday. So, everybody wish Tessa a happy belated birthday. Yes, Sunshine got her t-shirt. So, yeah. If you go to the link in my bio, you can go to the UndeadPapa Mercantile. I'm actually thinking about adding an option to sell through the TikTok shop. So, we shall see. You're in recovery. Oh boy. We'll have to talk about that. I want to hear all the details. All right. Well, let's get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. Tonight, we follow 2 stories that ask us to question the very nature of reality. Can a machine truly think? Can intelligence exist without a human mind? And what happens when the universe itself turns out to be far stranger than we ever imagined? Sometimes the greatest horrors are not monsters or ghosts, but ideas that refuse to be let go. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, and relax, because story time is about to begin. Our first story tonight was written over a century ago. yet asks the question that feels more relevant today than ever before. This is Moxon's Master by Ambrose Bierce. Are you serious? Do you really believe that a machine thinks? I got no immediate reply. Moxon was apparent. Good Lord, excuse me. I got no immediate reply. Moxon was apparently intent upon the coals in the grate, touching them deftly here and there with the fire poker till they signified a sense of his attention by a brighter glow. For several weeks I had been observing him in a growing habit of delay in answering even the most trivial of commonplace questions. His air, however, was that of preoccupation rather than deliberation. One might have said that he had something on his mind. Presently he said, "What is a machine? The word has been variously defined. Here is one definition from a popular dictionary. Any instrument or organization by which power is applied and made effective, or a desired effect produced. Well then, is not a man a machine? And you will admit that he thinks or thinks he thinks." "If you do not wish to answer my question," I said rather testily, "why not say so? All that you say is mere evasion. You know well enough that when I say machine, I do not mean a man, but something that man has made and controls." "When it does not control him," he said, rising abruptly and looking out of a window whence nothing was visible in the blackness of a stormy night. A moment later he turned about and with a smile said, "I beg your pardon. I had no thought of evasion. I considered the dictionary man's unconscious testimony suggestive and worth something in the discussion. I can give your question a direct answer easily enough. I do believe that a machine thinks about the work that it is doing." That was direct enough, certainly. It was not altogether pleasing, for it tended to confirm a sad suspicion that Moxon's devotion to study and work in his machine shop had not been good for him. I knew, for one thing, that he suffered from insomnia, and that is no light affliction. Had it affected his mind? His reply to my question seemed to me then evidence that it had. Perhaps I should think differently about it now. I was younger then, and among the blessings that are not denied to youth is ignorance. Incited by that great stimulant to controversy, I said, "And what, pray, does it think with, in the absence of a brain?" The reply, coming with less than his customary delay, took his favorite form of counter-interrogation. "With what does a plant think, in the absence of a brain?" "Ah, plants also belong to the philosopher class. I should be pleased to know some of their conclusions. You may omit the premises." "Perhaps," he replied, apparently unaffected by my foolish irony, "you may be able to infer their convictions from their acts. I will spare you the familiar examples of the sensitive mimosa, the several insectivorous flowers, and those whose stamens bend down and shake their pollen upon the entering bee in order that he may fertilize their distant mates. But observe this. In an open spot in my garden I planted a climbing vine. When it was barely above the surface, I set a stake into the soil a yard away. The vine at once made for it, but as it was about to reach it after several days, I removed it a few feet. The vine at once altered its course, making an acute angle, and again made for the stake. This maneuver was repeated several times, but finally, as if discouraged, the vine abandoned the pursuit and, ignoring further attempts to divert it, traveled to a small tree further away, which it climbed. Roots of the eucalyptus will prolong themselves incredibly in search of moisture. A well-known horticulturist relates that one entered an old drain pipe and followed it until it came to a break, whereat a section of the pipe had been removed to make a way for a stone wall that had been built across its course. The root left the drain and followed the wall until it found an opening, where a stone had fallen out. It crept through, and following the other side of the wall to the drain, entered the unexplored part and resumed its journey. And this? Can you miss the significance of it? It shows the consciousness of plants. It proves that they think. Even if it did, what then? We are speaking not of plants, but of machines. They may be composed partly of wood that has no longer vitality, or wholly of metal. Is thought an attribute also of the mineral kingdom? How else do you explain the phenomena, for example, of crystallization? I do not explain them, because you cannot without affirming that you wish you wish to deny, namely intelligent cooperation among the constituent elements of the crystals. When soldiers form lines or hollow squares, you call it reason. When wild geese in flight take form of a letter V, you say instinct. When the homogeneous atoms of a mineral, moving freely in solution, arrange themselves into shapes mathematically perfect, or particles of frozen moisture into the symmetrical and beautiful forms of snowflakes, you have nothing to say. You have not even invented a name to conceal your heroic unreason. Moxon was speaking with unusual animation and earnestness. As he paused, I heard in an adjoining room known to me as his machine shop, which no one but himself was permitted to enter, a singular thumping sound, as if someone pounding upon a table with an open hand. Moxon heard it at the same moment, and, visibly agitated, rose and hurriedly passed into the room whence it came. I thought it odd that anyone else should be in there, and my interest in my friend, with doubtless a touch of unwarranted curiosity, led me to listen intently. I am happy to say, not at the keyhole. There were confused sounds, as of a struggle or scuffle. The floor shook. I distinctly heard hard breathing and a hoarse whisper which said, "Damn you!" Then all was silent. And presently Moxon reappeared and said, with a rather sorry smile, "Pardon me for leaving you so abruptly. I have a machine in there that lost its temper and cut up rough." Fixing my eyes steadily upon his left cheek, which was traversed by 4 parallel excoriations showing blood, I said, "How would it do to trim its nails?" I could have spared myself the jest. He gave it no attention, but seated himself in the chair that he had left and resumed the interrupted monologue as if nothing had occurred. "Doubtless you do not hold with those, I need not name them to a man of your reading, who have taught that all matter is sentient, that every atom is a living, feeling, conscious being. I do. There is no such thing as dead, inert matter. It is all alive, all instinct with force, actual and potential, all sensitive to the same forces in its environment, and susceptible to contagion of higher and subtler ones residing in such superior organisms as it may be brought into relation with, as those of man when he is fashioning it into an instrument of his will. It absorbs something of his intelligence and purpose, more of them in proportion to the complexity of the resulting machine and that of its work. Do you happen to recall Herbert Spencer's definition of life? I read it 30 years ago. He may have altered it afterward, or for anything I know, but in all that time I have been unable to think of a single word that could profitably be changed or added or removed. It seems to me not only the best definition, but the only possible one. Life, he says, is a definite combination of heterogeneous changes, both simultaneous and successive, in correspondence with external coexistences and sequences. That defines the phenomena, I said, but gives no hint of its cause. That, he replied, is all that any definition can do. As Mill points out, we know nothing of cause except as an antecedent. Wow. Nothing of effect except as a consequent. Of certain phenomena one never occurs without another, which is dissimilar. The first in point of time we call cause, the second effect. One who had many times seen a rabbit pursued by a dog, and had never seen rabbits and dogs otherwise, would think the rabbit the cause of the dog. But I fear, he added, laughing naturally enough, that my rabbit is leading me a long way from the track of my legitimate quarry. I'm indulging in the pleasure of the chase for its own sake. What I want you to observe is that in Herbert Spencer's definition of life, the activity of a machine is included. There is nothing in the definition that is not applicable to it. According to this sharpest of observers and deepest of thinkers, if a man during his period of activity is alive, so is a machine when in operation. As an inventor and constructor of machines, I know that to be true. Moxon was silent for a long time, gazing absently into the fire. It was growing late, and I thought it time to be going. But somehow I did not like the notion of leaving him in that isolated house, all alone except for the presence of some person whose nature my conjectures could go no further than that it was an unfriendly, perhaps malign. Leaning toward him and looking earnestly into his eyes, while making a motion with my hand through the door of his workshop, I said, "Moxon, whom have you in there?" Somewhat to my surprise, he laughed lightly and answered without hesitation, "Nobody. The incident that you have in mind was caused by my folly in leaving a machine in action with nothing to act upon, while I undertook the interminable task of enlightening your understanding. Do you happen to know that consciousness is the creature of rhythm?" "Oh, bother them both," I replied, rising and laying hold of my overcoat. "I'm going to wish you good night, and I'll add the hope that the machine which you inadvertently left in action will have her gloves on the next time you think it needful to stop her." Without waiting to observe the effect of my shot, I left the house. Rain was falling, and the darkness was intense. In the sky beyond the crest of a hill toward which I groped my way along precarious plank sidewalks and across miry, unpaved streets, I could see the faint glow of the city's lights, but behind me but behind me nothing was visible but a single window of Moxon's house. It glowed with what seemed to me a mysterious and fateful meaning. I knew it was an uncurtained aperture in my friend's machine shop, and I had little doubt that he had resumed the studies interrupted by his duties as my instructor in mechanical consciousness and the fatherhood of rhythm. Odd and in some degree humorous, as his convictions seemed to me at the time, I could not wholly divest myself of the feeling that they had some tragic relation to his life and character, perhaps to his destiny, although I no longer entertained the notion that they were the vagaries of a disordered mind. Whatever might be thought of his views, his exposition of them was too logical for that. Over and over his last words came back to me. Consciousness is the creature of rhythm. Bald and terse as the statement was, I now found it infinitely alluring. At each recurrence, it broadened in meaning and deepened in suggestion. Why, here, I thought, is something upon which I found a philosophy. If consciousness is the product of rhythm, all things are consciousness, for all have motion, and all motion is rhythmic. I wondered if Moxon knew the significance and breadth of his thought, the scope of this momentous generalization, or had he arrived at his philosophic faith by the tortuous and uncertain road of observation? That faith was new to me, and all Moxon's expounding had failed to make me a convert. But now it seemed as if a great light shone about me, like that which fell upon Saul of Tarsus, and out there in the storm and darkness and solitude I experienced what Lewes calls the endless variety of excitement and philosophic thought. I exulted in a new sense of knowledge, a new pride of reason. My feet seemed hardly to touch the earth. It was as if I were uplifted and borne through the air by invisible wings. Yielding to an impulse to seek further light from him, whom I now recognized as my master and guide, I had unconsciously turned about, and almost before I was aware of having done so, found myself again at Moxon's door. I was drenched with rain, but felt no discomfort. Unable in my excitement to find the doorbell, I instinctively tried the knob. It turned, and entering, I mounted the stairs to the room that I had so recently left. All was dark and silent. Moxon, as I had supposed, was in the adjoining room, the machine shop. Groping along the wall until I found the communicating door, I knocked loudly several times, but got no response, which I attributed to the uproar outside, for the wind was blowing a gale and dashing the rain against the thin walls in sheets. The drumming upon the shingle roof spanning the unsealed room was loud and incessant. I had never been invited into the machine shop, had indeed been denied admittance, as had all others, with one exception. A skilled metal worker of whom no one knew anything except that his name was Haley and his habit silence. But in my spiritual exaltation, discretion and civility were alike forgotten, and I opened the door. What I saw took all philosophical speculation out of me in short order. Moxon sat facing me at the farther side of a small table upon which a single candle made all the light that was in the room. Opposite him, his back toward me, sat another person. On the table between the two was a chessboard. The men were playing. I knew little of chess, but as only a few pieces were on the board, it was obvious that the game was near its close. Moxon was intensely interested, not so much, it seemed to me, in the game as in his antagonist, upon whom he fixed so intent a look that, standing though I did directly in the line of his vision, I was altogether unobserved. His face was ghastly white, and his eyes glittered like diamonds. Of his antagonist I had only a back view, but that was sufficient. I should not have cared to see his face. He was apparently not more than 5 feet in height, with proportions suggesting those of a gorilla. A tremendous breadth of shoulders, thick, short neck, and broad, squat head, which had a tangled growth of black hair and was topped with a crimson fez. A tunic of the same color, belted tightly to the waist, reached the seat, apparently a box, upon which he sat. His legs and feet were not seen. His left forearm appeared to rest in his lap. He moved his pieces with his right hand, which seemed disproportionately long. I had shrunk back, and now stood a little to one side of the doorway and in shadow. If Moxon had looked farther than the face of his opponent, he could have observed nothing now except that the door was open. Something forbade me either to enter or to retire, a feeling, I know not how it came, that I was in the presence of an imminent tragedy and might serve my friend by remaining. With scarcely conscious rebellion against the indelicacy of the act that I remained. The play was rapid. Moxon hardly glanced at the board before making his moves, and to my unskilled eye seemed to move the piece most convenient to his hand. His motions in doing so being quick, nervous, and lacking in precision. The response of his antagonist, while equally prompt in the inception, was made with a slow, uniform, mechanical, and, I thought, somewhat theatrical movement of the arm. That was a sore trial to my patience. There was something unearthly about it all, and I caught myself shuddering. But I was wet and cold. 2 or 3 times after moving a piece, the stranger slightly inclined his head, and each time I observed that Moxon shifted his king. All at once the thought came to me that the man was dumb, and then that he was a machine, an automaton chess player. Then I remembered that Moxon had once spoken to me of having invented such a piece of mechanism, though I did not understand that it had actually been constructed. Was all his talk about the consciousness and intelligence of machines merely a prelude to eventual exhibition of this device? Only a trick to intensify the effect of its mechanical action upon me in my ignorance of its secret? A fine end, this, of all my intellectual transports, my endless variety and excitement of philosophic thought. I was about to retire in disgust when something occurred to hold my curiosity. I observed a shrug of the thing's great shoulders as if it were irritated. And so natural was this, so entirely human, that in my new view of the matter it startled me. Nor was that all, for a moment later it struck the table sharply with its clenched hand. At that gesture, Moxon seemed even more startled than I. He pushed his chair a little backward as in alarm. Presently, Moxon, whose play it was, raised his hand high above the board and pounced upon one of his chess pieces like a sparrow hawk with the exclamation, "Checkmate!" rose quickly to his feet and stepped behind his chair. The automaton sat motionless. The wind had gone down now, but I heard at lessening intervals and progressively louder the rumble and roll of thunder. In the pauses between, I now became conscious of a low humming or buzzing, which, like the thunder, grew momentarily louder and more distinct. It seemed to come from the body of the automaton, and was unmistakably a whirring of wheels. It gave me the impression of a disordered mechanism which had escaped the repressive and regulating action of some controlling part, an effect such as might be expected if a pawl should be jostled from the teeth of a ratchet wheel. But before I had time for much conjecture as to its nature, my attention was taken by the strange motions of the automaton itself. A slight but continuous convulsion appeared to have possession of it. In body and head it shook like a man with palsy or an ague chill, and the motion augmented every moment until the entire figure was in violent agitation. Suddenly it sprang to its feet, and with a movement almost too quick for the eye to follow shot forward across the table and chair with both arms thrust forth to their full length. The posture and lunge of a diver, Moxon tried to throw himself backward out of reach, but he was too late. I saw the horrible thing's hands close upon his throat, his own clutch its wrists. Then the table was overturned, the candle thrown to the floor and extinguished. All was black dark. But the noise of the struggle was dreadfully distinct, and most terrible of all were the raucous, squawking sounds made by the strangled man's efforts to breathe. Guided by the infernal hubbub, I sprang to the rescue of my friends, but had hardly taken a stride in the darkness when the whole room blazed with a blinding white light that burned into my brain and heart and memory a vivid picture of the combatants on the floor. Moxon underneath, his throat still in the clutch of those iron hands, his head forced backward, his eyes protruding, his mouth wide open, and his tongue thrust out. And horrible contrast upon the painted face of his assassin, of an expression of tranquil and profound thought, as in the solution of a problem in chess. This I observed. Then all was blackness and silence. 3 days later, I recovered consciousness in a hospital. As the memory of that tragic night slowly evolved in my ailing brain, recognized in my attendants Moxon's confidential workman, Haley. Responding to a look, he approached, smiling. "Tell me about it," he managed to say faintly. "All about it." "Certainly," he said. "You were carried unconscious from a burning house, Moxon's. Nobody knows how you came to be there. You may have to do a little explaining. The origin of the fire is a bit mysterious, too. My own notion is that the house was struck by lightning." "And Moxon?" "Buried yesterday. What was left of him." Apparently this reticent person could unfold himself on occasion. When imparting shocking intelligence to the sick, he was affable enough. After some moments of the keenest mental suffering, I ventured to ask another question. "Who rescued me?" "Well, if that interests you, I did." "Thank you, Mr. Haley, and may God bless you for it." "Did you rescue also that charming product of your skill, the automaton chess player that murdered its inventor?" The man was silent a long time, looking away from me. Presently he turned and gravely said, "Do you know that?" "I do," I replied. "I saw it done." That was many years ago. If asked today, I should answer less confidently. And that was the end of the story. right. So how are we all doing tonight? So what did you guys think? Terrible? Tessa, do you have a hangover? Did you party too hard? That's all right, crazy mama. I got another story. And I think this one is even better. Hey, question for my regulars. Has anybody seen Wings or talked to Wings recently? Z-Bot. Wouldn't we like to know? Yeah, she hasn't been. Okay, she hasn't been in lives recently. Was she here Wednesday night? Because I didn't see her. Usually she's pretty active, and I didn't see anything. I'll have to DM her, see how she's doing, see if she's okay. Can't let one of my mods be suffering without me talking to her. She's good people. Alrighty then. Can I just talk forever? No. I get to be about 2 hours and my voice starts to give out. But you're welcome to go through my videos and listen to me talk. And if you want to go over on the tubes, there's even longer stuff. I'm doing all right, Buford. How are you? Surviving this freaking hot weather. I actually am adding another audiobook up on the tubes very soon. It's Algernon Blackwood's The Empty House, which we did here a few weeks ago. Well, thank you, Solace. I appreciate you. I'm here 4 times a week. VG, how you doing, brother? I'm an all-around delight. I'll take your word for it on that one. Having another brownie just because. Are they good? Are they special brownies? I want special brownies. Yes, Tessa is going to share her talent with the world via audiobooks. Crazy mama, isn't it great? I like special brownies. Have I been professionally booked before? Yes, I have. I actually have a handful of audiobooks on Audible. The 2 that I'm actually most proud of is one called Banebirth. It's Banebirth, written by a gentleman by the name of Gabriel J. Smith, who is actually here on TikTok and pops in every once in a while. Great guy, wonderful guy to work for. The other one that I'm really proud of is called Nexus Point, written by a gentleman named S.V. Stan. It's a great science fiction story. Yeah. So, but I've also done some stuff over on my on the tubes. Oh, you got your Jim Jam shirt. Awesome. That's awesome. I'm so how is the design? Does it work on the shirt? I'm just yeah. Oh, you're listening to Banebirds now? Awesome. Let me know what you think, because it was actually my very first paid audiobook job. So do I have to personally like the book to accept the task? Yes and no. Hey, Sonia says, how are you? So far, I have been relatively blessed that the books that I have done have been very good. And the nice thing that works for me is that um, the authors that I have worked with want to continue to work with me, which is so cool. I know Gabe has a second book in the works, and I am working on one now that with a dual narration that is going to be um, um, two more books. So, and she's already expressed a desire to be there. Hey, Care Bear, how we doing? By the way, for those that don't know, I will be doing that. Don't know yet. I will be doing starting the BFG on by Roald Dahl on Sunday. So I hope that my young friends will come in. Oh, Solace, totally fine. I mean, I I have liked all the books that I've done, but I think I've had a couple. I've actually had one that I had to step back from because it promoted some ideas that I was uncomfortable with, and I won't go into detail, but it was one of those things where I was like, you know what, I can't I can't be a part of this. Um, so yeah, and then I had another one that I had to step back from because I discovered it was written with AI, like heavily written with AI. So, you know, I I had to step back from that one too because it was poorly. It was really there were like severe story inconsistencies, and like I literally got through to like middle of the book and two chapters were named the exact same thing, but they were different chapters. And I was like, this is freaking weird. And then I started to look through, and it was definitely an AI. So I kind of I had to step back from that one, and I reported it to ACX. And I hate to do that. I hate to do that because AI is a tool and could be of benefit to people if they use it ethically. And um, I don't get down with using it to be your creative source. Like writing a book with AI is not. It's just it's cheap. It's there's no creativity in it. If you're gonna use it to enhance your creativity, not replace your creativity. You know, it's I, it's a tool, like anything else. Um, so it's one of those things that I don't believe it's the boogeyman that everybody's making it out to be. I believe that there are some ethics issues that need to be worked out. I think um, the problem with the data centers is not the data centers themselves, because a lot of companies, especially like Google, is starting to use something called closed looped cooling, which basically is a constant cycling of water through the system. They're not adding water to it. It's a closed system that actually cools the data center. Um, there are things that we can do to continue to be able to use this tool ethically. Um, but it's like anything else. I mean, people kick back on it. It's like people when Photoshop started to be used for illustration, people started kicking and screaming about it. It's not real art, and you can't do that. Now almost every commercial artist uses it. It we got to evolve. We got to evolve with the technology, you know. But I'll get off my soapbox. Hey, Songbird, I didn't see you squeak in here. I appreciate you coming in. All right, and now we leave behind a machine that dared to think and turn our eyes to the stars. Some questions change the way we see the future, others change the way we see the universe itself. Arthur C. Clarke was a master of taking one impossible idea and asking, what if it were true? This is The Wall of Darkness by Arthur C. Clarke. Hang on. Gotta fix my document here. Make it so I can read it. Whoop, there we go. Okay. This was first published, by the way, in July of 1949 in the magazine Super Science Stories. Many and strange are the universes that drift like bubbles in the foam upon the river of time. Some, a very few, move against or athwart its current, and fewer still are those that lie forever beyond its reach, knowing nothing of the future or the past. Shervain's tiny cosmos was not one of those. Its strangeness was of a different order. It held one world only, the planet of Shervain's race, a single star, the great sun Trilorn, that brought it life and light. Shervain knew nothing of night, for Trilorn was always high above the horizon, dipping near it only in the long months of winter. Beyond the borders of the Shadowland, it was true. There came a season when Trilorn disappeared below the edge of the world, and a darkness fell in which nothing could live. But even when the darkness was not absolute, though there were no stars, but even then the darkness was not absolute, though there were no stars to relieve it. Alone in its little cosmos, turning the same face away always toward its solitary sun, Shervain's world was the last and the strongest jest of the maker of the stars. Yet as he looked across his father's lands, the thoughts that filled Shervain's mind were those that any human child might have known. He felt awe and curiosity, and a little fear, and above all a longing to go out into the great world before him. These things he was still too young to do, but the ancient house was on the highest ground for many miles, and he could look far out over the land that would one day be his. When he turned to the north, with Trilorn shining full upon his face, he could see many miles away the long line of mountains that curved around to the right, rising higher and higher until they disappeared behind him in the direction of the Shadowland. One day, when he was older, he would go through those mountains along the pass that led to the great lands of the east. On his left was the ocean, only a few miles away, and sometimes Shervain could hear the thunder of the waves as they fought and tumbled on the gently sloping sands. No one knew how far the ocean reached. Ships had set out across it, sailing northward, while Trilorn rose high and higher and higher in the sky, and the heat of its rays grew ever more intense. Long before the great sun had reached the zenith, they had been forced to return. If the mythical Firelands did indeed exist, no man could ever hope to reach their burning shores, unless the legends were really true. Once it was said there had been swift metal ships that could cross the ocean despite the heat of Trilorn, and so come to the lands on the other side of the world. Now these countries could be reached only by a tedious journey over land and sea, which could be shortened no more than a little by traveling as far north as one dared. All the inhabited countries of Shervain's world lay in the narrow belt between burning heat and insufferable cold. In every land the far north was an unapproachable region smitten by the fury of Trilorn, and to the south of all countries lay the vast and gloomy Shadowland, where Trilorn was never more than a pale disk on the horizon, and often was not visible at all. These things Shervain learned in the years of his childhood, and in those years he had no wish to leave the whole lands between the mountains and the sea. Since the dawn of time, his ancestors and the races before them had toiled to make these lands the fairest in the world. If they had failed, it was by a narrow margin. There were gardens bright with strange flowers. There were streams that trickled gently between moss-grown rocks to be lost in the pure waters of the tideless sea. There were fields of grain that rustled continually in the wind as if the generations of seeds yet unborn were talking one to the other. In the wide meadows and beneath the trees, the friendly cattle wandered aimlessly with foolish cries. And there was the great house, with its enormous rooms and its endless corridors, vast enough in reality, but huger still to the mind of a child. This was the world in which Shervain had passed his years, the world he knew and loved. As yet, what lay beyond its borders had not concerned his mind. But Shervain's universe was not one of those free from the domination of time. The harvest ripened and was gathered into the granaries. Trilorn rocked slowly through its little arc of the sky, and with the passing seasons, Shervain's mind and body grew. His land seemed smaller now. The mountains were nearer, and the sea was only a brief walk from the great house. He began to learn of the world in which he lived, and to be made ready for the part he must play in its shaping. Some of these things he learned from his father, Sherval, but most he was taught by Grail, who had come across the mountains in the days of his father's father, and had now been tutor to 3 generations of Shervain's family. He was fond of Grail, though the old man taught him many things he had no wish to learn, and the years of his boyhood passed pleasantly enough until the time came for him to go through the mountains into the lands beyond. Ages ago his family had come from the great countries of the East, and in every generation since, the eldest son had made that pilgrimage again to spend a year of his youth among his cousins. It was a wise custom, for beyond the mountains much of the knowledge of the past still lingered, and there one could meet men from other lands and study their ways. In the last spring before his son's departure, Sherval collected 3 of his servants and certain animals it is convenient to call horses, and took Shervain to see those parts of the land he had never visited before. They rode west to the sea, and followed it for many days, until Trilorn was noticeably nearer the horizon. Still they went south, their shadows lengthening before them, turning again to the east only when the rays of the sun seemed to have lost all their power. They were now well within the limits of the Shadowland, and it would not be wise to go further south until the summer was at its height. Shervain was riding beside his father, watching the changing landscape with all the eager curiosity of a boy seeing a new country for the first time. His father was talking about the soul, describing the crops that could be grown here, and those that would fail if the attempt were made. But Shervain's attention was elsewhere. He was staring out across the desolate Shadowland, wondering how far it stretched and what mysteries it held. "Father," he said presently, "if you went south in a straight line right across the Shadowland, would you reach the other side of the world?" His father smiled. "Men have asked that question for centuries," he said, "but there are 2 reasons why they will never know the answer." "What are they?" "First, of course, is the darkness and the cold. Even here nothing can live during the winter months, but there is a better reason, though I see that Grail has not spoken of it." "I don't think he has, at least I do not remember." For a moment, Sherville did not reply. He stood up in his stirrups and surveyed the land to the south. "Once I knew this place well," he said to Shervain. "Come, I have something to show you." They turned away from the path they had been following, and for several hours rode once more with their backs to the sun. The land was rising slowly now, and Shervain saw that they were climbing a great ridge of rock that pointed like a dagger into the heart of the Shadowland. They came presently to a hill too steep for the horses to ascend, and here they dismounted and left the animals in the servants' charge. "There is a way around," said Sherville, "but it is quicker for us to climb than to take the horses to the other side." The hill, though steep, was only a small one, and they reached its summit in a few minutes. At first, Shervain could see nothing he had not met before. There was only the same undulating wilderness, which seemed to become darker and more forbidding with every yard that its distance from Trilorn increased. He turned to his father with some bewilderment, but Sherville pointed to the far south and drew a careful line across the horizon. "It is not easy to see," he said quietly. "My father showed it to me from this same spot many years before you were born." Shervain stared into the dusk. The southern sky was so dark as to be almost black, and it came down to meet the edge of the world, but not quite. For along the horizon, in a great curve dividing land from sky, yet seeming to belong to neither, was a band of deeper darkness, black as the night which Shervain had never known. He looked at it steadfastly for a long time, and perhaps some hint of the future may have crept into his soul, for the darkling land seemed suddenly alive and waiting. When at last he tore his eyes away, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again, though he was still too young to recognize the challenge for what it was. And so, for the first time in his life, Shervain saw the wall. You guys are awesome. I'm reading this, and the first thing that came into my mind when they're up at the top of the hill and they're looking out, all I can think of is, like, the Lion King. Everything the light touches. Like... No, I love Arthur C. Clarke's writing. He has such a lyrical way of writing about these, crazy concepts. In the early spring, he said farewell to his people and went with one servant over the mountains into the great lands of the eastern world. Here he met the men who shared his ancestry, and here he studied the history of his race, the arts that had grown from ancient times, and the sciences that ruled the lives of men. In the places of learning, he made friends with boys who had come from lands even farther to the east. Few of these was he likely to see again, but one was to play a greater part in his life than either could have imagined. Braelden's father was a famous architect, but his son intended to eclipse him. He was traveling from land to land, always learning, watching, asking questions. Though he was only a few years older than Shervain, his knowledge of the world was infinitely greater, or so it seemed to the younger boy. Between them they took the world to pieces and rebuilt it according to their desires. Braelden dreamed of cities whose great avenues and stately towers would shame even the wonders of the past. But Shervain's interest lay more with the people who would dwell in those cities and the way they ordered their lives. They often spoke of the Wall, which Braelden knew from the stories of his own people, though he himself had never seen it. Far to the south of every country, as Shervain had learned, it lay like a great barrier athwart the Shadowland. In high summer it could be reached, though only with difficulty, but nowhere was there any way of passing it, and no one knew what lay beyond. An entire world never pausing even when it reached 100 times the height of a man. It encircled the wintry sea that washed the shores of the Shadowland. Travelers had stood upon those lonely beaches, scarcely warmed by the last thin rays of Trilorn, and had seen how the dark shadow of the Wall marched out to sea, contemptuous of the waves behind its feet. And on the far shores other travelers had watched it come striding in across the ocean, to sweep past them on its journey around the world. "One of my uncles," said Braelden, "once reached the Wall when he was a young man. He did it for a wager, and he rode for 10 days before he came beneath it. I think it frightened him. It was so huge and cold. He could not tell if it was made of metal or stone. And when he shouted, there was no echo at all, but his voice died away quickly as if the Wall were swallowing the sound. My people believe it is the end of the world and there is nothing beyond." "If that were true," Shervain replied with irrefutable logic, "the ocean would have poured over the edge before the Wall was built." Not if Chiron built it when he made the world." Shervain did not agree. "My people believe it is the work of man. Perhaps the engineers of the first dynasty who made so many wonderful things. If they really had ships that could reach the Firelands, and even ships that could fly, they might have possessed enough wisdom to build the Wall." Braelden shrugged. "They must have had a very good reason," he said. "We can never know the answer, so why worry about it?" This eminently practical advice, as Shervain had discovered, was all that the ordinary man ever gave him. Only philosophers were interested in unanswerable questions. To most people, the enigma of the Wall, like the problem of existence itself, was something that scarcely concerned their minds, and all the philosophers he had met had given him different answers. First there had been Grail, whom he had questioned on his return from the Shadowland. The old man had looked at him quietly and said, "There is only one thing beyond the Wall, so I have heard, and that is madness." Then there had been Artax, who was so old that he could scarcely hear Shervain's nervous questioning. He gazed at the boy through eyelids that seemed too tired to open fully, and had replied after a long time, "Chiron built the Wall in the 3rd day of making the world. What is beyond we shall discover when we die, for there go the souls of all the dead." Yet Ergen, who lived in the same city, had flatly contradicted this. "Only memory can answer your question, my son, For beyond the wall is the land in which we lived before our births. Whom could he believe? The truth was that no one knew. If the knowledge had ever been possessed, it had been lost ages ago. Though this quest was unsuccessful, Shervain had learned many things in his year of study. With the returning spring, he said farewell to Braelden and the other friends he had known for such a little while, and set out along the ancient road that led him back to his own country. Once again he made the perilous journey through the great pass between the mountains, where walls of ice hung threatening against the sky. He came to the place where the road curved down once more toward the world of men, where there was warmth and running water, and the breath no longer labored in the freezing air. Here, on the last rise of the road before it descended into the valley, one could see far out across the land to the distant gleam of the ocean. And there, almost lost in the mists at the edge of the world, Shervain could see the line of shadow that was his own country. He went on down the great ribbon of stone until he came to the bridge that men had built across the cataract in the ancient days when the only other way had been destroyed by earthquake. But the bridge was gone. The storms and avalanches of early spring had swept away one of the mighty piers, and the beautiful metal rainbow lay a twisted ruin in the spray and foam 1,000 feet below. The summer would have come and gone before the road could be opened once more. As Shervain sadly returned, he knew that another year must pass ere he would see his home again. He paused for many minutes on the last curve of the road, looking back toward the unattainable land that held all the things he loved. But the mists had closed over it, and he saw it no more. Resolutely he turned back along the road until the open lands had vanished and the mountains enfolded him again. Braelden was still in the city when Shervain returned. He was surprised and pleased to see his friend, and together they discussed what should be done in the year ahead. Shervain's cousins, who had grown fond of their guest, were not sorry to see him again, but their kindly suggestion that he should devote another year to study was not well received. Shervain's plan matured slowly, in the face of considerable opposition. Even Braelden was not enthusiastic at first, and much argument was needed before he would cooperate. Therefore, the agreement of everyone else who mattered was only a question of time. Summer was approaching when the boys set out toward Braelden's country. They rode swiftly, for the journey was a long one and must be completed before Trilome began its winter fall. When they reached the lands that Braelden knew, they made certain inquiries that caused much shaking of heads. But the answers they obtained were accurate, and soon the Shadowland was all around them, and presently, for the second time in his life, Shervain saw the wall. It seemed not far away when they first came upon it, rising from a bleak and lonely plain. Yet they rode endlessly across the plain before the wall grew any nearer, and then they had almost reached its base before they realized how close they were, for there was no way of judging its distance until one could reach out and touch it. When Shervain gazed up at the monstrous ebony sheet that had so troubled his mind, it seemed to be overhanging and about to crush him beneath its falling weight. With difficulty he tore his eyes away from the hypnotic sight and went nearer to examine the material of which the wall was built. It was true, as Braelden had told him, that it felt cold to the touch, colder than it had any right to be even in this sun-starved land. It felt neither hard nor soft, for its texture eluded the hand in a way that was difficult to analyze. Sylvain had the impression that something was preventing him from actual contact with the surface, yet he could see no space between the wall and his fingers when he forced them against it. Strangest of all was the uncanny silence of which Braden's uncle had spoken. Every word was deadened, and all sounds died away with unnatural swiftness. Braden had unloaded some tools and instruments from the pack horses and had begun to examine the wall's surface. He found very quickly that no drills or cutters would mark it in any way, and presently he came to the conclusion Sylvain had already reached. The wall was not merely adamant, it was unapproachable. At last, in disgust, he took a perfectly straight metal rule and pressed its edge against the wall, while Sylvain held a mirror to reflect the feeble light of Trilorn along the line of contact. Braden peered at the rule from the other side. It was as he had thought. An infinitely straight, narrow streak of light showed unbroken between the two surfaces. Braden looked thoughtfully at his friend. "Sylvain," he said, "I don't believe the wall is made of matter as we know it." "Then perhaps the legends were right that said it was never built at all, but created as we see it now." "I think so too," said Braden. "The engineers of the First Dynasty had such powers. There are some very ancient buildings in my land that seem to have been made in a single operation from a substance that shows absolutely no sign of weathering. If it were black instead of colored, it would be very much like the material of the wall." He put away his useless tools and began to set up a simple, portable theodolite. If I can do nothing else," he said with a wry smile, "at least I can find exactly how high it is." When they looked back for their last view of the wall, Sylvain wondered if he would ever see it again. There was nothing more he could learn. For the future, he must forget this foolish dream that he might one day master its secret. Perhaps there was no secret at all. Perhaps beyond the wall the Shadowland stretched round the curve of the world until it met the same barrier again. That surely seemed the likeliest thing, but if it were so, then why had the wall been built? And by what race? With an almost angry effort of will, he put these thoughts aside and rode forward into the light of Trilorn, thinking of a future in which the wall would play no more part than it did in the lives of other men. So 2 years had passed before Sylvain could return to his home. In 2 years, especially when one is young, much can be forgotten. Even the things nearest to the heart lose their distinctness, so that they can no longer be clearly recalled. When Sylvain came through the last foothills of the mountains and was again in the country of his childhood, the joy of his homecoming was mingled with a strange sadness. So many things were forgotten that he had once thought his mind would hold forever. The news of his return had gone before him, and soon he saw far ahead a line of horses galloping along the road. He pressed forward eagerly, wondering if Sherval would be there to greet him, and was a little disappointed when he saw that Grail was leading the procession. Sylvain halted as the old man rode up to his horse. Then Grail put his hand upon his shoulder, but for a while he turned away his head and could not speak. And presently, Shervain learned that the storms of the year before had destroyed more than the ancient bridge, for the lightning had brought his own home in ruins to the ground. Years before the appointed time, all the lands that Sherval had owned had passed into the possession of his son. Far more, indeed, than these, for the whole family had been assembled, according to its yearly custom, in the great house when the fire had come down upon it. In a single moment of time, everything between the mountains and the sea had passed into his keeping. He was the richest man his land had known for generations, and all these things he would have given to look again into the calm gray eyes of the father he would see no more. Trilorn had risen and fallen in the sky many times since Shervain took leave of his childhood on the road before the mountains. The land had flourished in the passing years, and the possessions that had so suddenly become his had steadily increased their value. He had husbanded them well, and now he had time once more in which to dream. More than that, he had the wealth to make his dreams come true. Often stories had come across the mountains of the work Braelden was doing in the east, and although the two friends had never met since their youth, they had exchanged messages regularly. Braelden had achieved his ambitions. Not only had he designed the two largest buildings erected since the ancient days, but a whole new city had been planned by him, though it would not be completed in his lifetime. Hearing of these things, Shervain remembered the aspirations of his own youth, and his mind went back across the years to the day when they had stood together beneath the majesty of the wall. For a long time he wrestled with his thoughts, fearing to revive old longings that might not be assuaged. But at last he made his decision and wrote to Braelden. For what was the use of wealth and power unless they could be used to shape one's dreams? Then Shervain waited, wondering if Braelden had forgot the past in the years that had brought him fame. He had not long to wait. Braelden could not come at once, for he had great works to carry to their completion, but when they were finished, he would join his old friend. Shervain had thrown him a challenge that was worthy of his skill. One which he could meet would bring him more satisfaction than anything he had yet done. Early the next summer he came, and Shervain met him on the road below the bridge. They had been boys when they last parted, and now they were nearing middle age. Yet as they greeted one another, the years seemed to fall away, and each was secretly glad to see how lightly time had touched the friend he remembered. They spent many days in conference together, considering the plans that Braelden had drawn up. The work was an immense one, and would take many years to complete, but it was possible to a man of Shervain's wealth. Before he gave his final assent, he took his friend to see Grail. The old man had been living for some years in the little house that Shervain had built him. For a long time he had played no active part in the life of the great estates, but his advice was always ready when it was needed, and it was invariably wise. Grail knew why Braden had come to this land, and he expressed no surprise when the architect unrolled his sketches. The largest drawing showed the elevation of the wall, with a great stairway rising along its side from the plains beneath. At 6 equally spaced intervals, the slowly ascending ramp levered out into wide platforms, the last of which was only a short distance below the summit of the wall. Springing from the stairway at the score of places along its length were flying buttresses which to Grail's eye seemed very frail and slender for the work they had to do. Then he realized that the great ramp would be largely self-supporting, and on one side all the lateral thrust would be taken by the wall itself. He looked at the drawing in silence for a while, then remarked quietly, "You always manage to have your way, Shervain. I might have guessed that this would happen in the end." "Then you think it is a good idea?" Shervain asked. He had never gone against the old man's advice, and was anxious to have it now. As usual, Grail came straight to the point. "How much will it cost?" he said. Brailden told him, and for a moment there was a shocked silence. "That includes," the architect said hastily, "the building of a good road across the Shadowland, and the construction of a small town for the workmen. The stairway itself is made from about 1,000,000 identical blocks, which can be dovetailed together to form a rigid structure. We shall make these, I hope, from the minerals we find in the Shadowland." He sighed a little. "I should have liked to have built it from metal rods jointed together, but that would have cost even more, for all the material would have to be brought over the mountains." Grail examined the drawing more closely. "Why have you stopped short of the top?" he asked. Brailden looked at Shervain, who answered the question with a trace of embarrassment. "I want to be the only one to make the final ascent," he replied. "The last stage will be by lifting a lifting machine on the highest platform. There may be danger. That is why I'm going alone." That was not the only reason, but it was a good one. Behind the wall, so Grail had once said, lay madness. If that were true, no one else need face it. Grail was speaking once more in his quiet, dreamy voice. "In that case," he said, "what you do is neither good nor bad, for it concerns you alone. If the wall was built to keep something from our world, it will be impassable on the other side." Brailden nodded. "We had thought of that," he said with a touch of pride. "If the need should come, the ramp can be destroyed in a moment by explosives at selected spots." "That is good," the old man replied, "though I do not believe those stories. It is well to be prepared. When the work is finished, I hope I shall still be here, and now I shall try to remember what I heard of the wall when I was as young as you were, Shervain, when you first questioned me about it." Before the winter came, the road to the wall had been marked out, and the foundations of the temporary town had been laid. Most of the materials Brailden needed were not hard to find, for the Shadowland was rich in minerals. He had also surveyed the wall itself and chosen the spot for the stairway. When Trilorn began to dip below the horizon, Brailden was well content with the work that had been done. By the next summer, the first of the myriad concrete blocks had been made and tested to Brailden's satisfaction, and before winter came again, some thousands had been produced and part of the foundations laid, leaving a trusted assistant in charge of the production. Brailden could now return to his interrupted work. When enough of the blocks had been made, he would be back to supervise the building, but until then his guidance would not be needed. 2 or 3 times in the course of every year, Shervain rode out to the wall to watch the stockpiles growing into great pyramids, and 4 years later Brailden returned with him, Layer by layer, the lines of stone started to creep up the flanks of the wall, and the slim buttresses began to arch out into space. At first, the stairway rose slowly, but as its summit narrowed, the increase became more and more rapid. For a third of every year, the work had to be abandoned, and there were anxious months in the long winter when Shervain stood on the borders of the Shadowland, listening to the storms that thundered past him into the reverberating darkness. But Braelden had built well, and every spring the work was standing unharmed as though it would outlive the wall itself. The last stones were laid 7 years after the beginning of the work. Standing a mile away so that he could see the structure in its entirety, Shervain remembered with wonder how all this had sprung from the few sketches Braelden had showed him years ago, and he knew something of the emotion the artist must feel when his dreams become reality. And he remembered, too, the day when, as a boy by his father's side, he had first seen the wall far off against the dusky sky of the Shadowland. There were guardrails around the upper platform, but Shervain did not care to go near its edge. The ground was at a dizzying distance, and he tried to forget his height by helping Braelden and the workmen erect the simple hoist that would lift him the remaining 20 feet. When it was ready, he stepped into the machine and turned to his friend with all the assurance he could muster. "I shall only be gone a few minutes," he said with elaborate casualness. "Whatever I find, I'll return immediately." He could hardly have guessed how small a choice was his. Grail was now almost blind and would not know another spring. But he recognized the approaching footsteps and greeted Braelden by name before his visitor had time to speak. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I've been thinking of everything you told me, and I believe I know the truth at last. Perhaps you have guessed it already." "No," said Braelden. "I have been afraid to think of it." The old man smiled a little. "Why should one be afraid of something merely because it is strange? The wall is wonderful, yes, but there's nothing terrible about it to those who will face its secret without flinching. When I was a boy, Braelden, my old master once said that time could never destroy the truth. It could only hide it among legends. He was right. From all the fables that have gathered around the wall, I can now select the ones that are part of history. Long ago, Braelden, when the first dynasty was at its height, Trilorn was hotter than it is now, and the Shadowland was fertile and inhabited, as perhaps one day the Firelands may be when Trilorn is old and feeble. Men could go southward as they pleased, for there was no wall to bar the way. Many must have done so, looking for new lands in which to settle. What happened to Shervain happened to them also, and it must have wrecked many minds, so many that the scientists of the first dynasty built the wall to prevent madness from spreading through the land. I cannot believe that this is true. But the legend says that it was made in a single day with no labor, out of a cloud that encircled the world." He fell into a reverie, and for a moment Braelden did not disturb him. His mind was far in the past, picturing his world as a perfect globe floating in space while the Ancient Ones threw that band of darkness around the equator. False though that picture was in its most important detail, he could never wholly erase it from his mind. As the last few feet of the wall moved slowly past his eyes, Shervain needed all his courage lest he cry out to be lowered again. He remembered certain terrible stories he had once dismissed with laughter, for he came of a race that was singularly free from superstition. But what if, after all, those stories had been true, and the wall had been built to keep some horror from the world? He tried to forget those thoughts, and found it not hard to do so once he had passed the topmost level of the wall. At first, he could not interpret the picture his eyes brought him. Then he saw that he was looking across an unbroken black sheet whose width he could not judge. The little platform came to a stop, and he noted with half-conscious admiration how accurate Braildon's calculations had been. Then, with a last word of assurance to the group below, he stepped onto the wall and began to walk steadily forward. At first, it seemed as if the plain before him was infinite, for he could not even tell where it met the sky. But he walked on unfaltering, keeping his back to Trilorn. He wished he could have used his own shadow as a guide, but it was lost in the deeper darkness beneath his feet. There was something wrong. It was growing darker with every footstep he took. Startled, he turned around and saw that the disk of Trilorn had now become pale and dusky, as if seen through a darkened glass. With mounting fear, he realized that this was by no means all that had happened. Trilorn was smaller than the son he had known all his life. He shook his head in an angry gesture of defiance. These things were fancies. He was imagining them. Indeed, they were so contrary to all experience that somehow he no longer felt frightened, but strode resolutely forward with only a glance at the sun behind. When Trilorn had dwindled to a point, and the darkness was all around him, it was time to abandon pretense. A wiser man would have turned back there and then, and Shervain had a sudden nightmare vision of himself lost in this eternal twilight between earth and sky, unable to retrace the path that led to safety. Then he remembered that as long as he could see Trilorn at all, he could be in no real danger. A little uncertainly now, he continued his way with many backward glances at the faint guiding light behind him. Trilorn itself had vanished, but there was still a dim glow in the sky to mark its place. And presently he needed its aid no longer, for far ahead a second light was appearing in the heavens. At first it seemed only the faintest of glimmers, and when he was sure of its existence he noticed that Trilorn had already disappeared. But he felt more confidence now, and as he moved onward the returning light did something to subdue his fears. When he saw that he was indeed approaching another sun, when he could tell beyond any doubt that it was expanding as a moment ago he had seen Trilorn contract, he forced all amazement down into the depths of his mind. He would only observe and record. Later there would be time to understand these things, that his world might possess two suns, one shining upon it from the either side, was not, after all, beyond imagination. Now at last he could see. Faintly through the darkness, the ebon line that marked the wall's other rim. Soon he would be the first man in thousands of years, perhaps in eternity, to look upon the lands that had sundered from his world. Would they be as fair as his own? And would there be people there whom he would be glad to greet? But that they would be waiting in such a way was more than he had dreamed. Grail stretched his hand out toward the cabinet beside him and fumbled for a large sheet of paper that was lying upon it. Braildon watched him in silence. The old man continued. How often we have all heard arguments about the size of the universe and whether it has any boundaries. We can imagine no ending to space, yet our minds rebel at the idea of infinity. Some philosophers have imagined that space is limited by curvature in a higher dimension. I suppose you know the theory. It may be true of other universes if they exist, but for ours the answer is more subtle. Along the line of the wall, Braildon, our universe comes to an end, and yet does not. There was no boundary, nothing to stop one going onward before the wall was built. The wall itself is merely a man-made barrier sharing the properties of the space in which it lies. Those properties were always there, and the wall added nothing to them. He held the sheet of paper toward Braildon and slowly rotated it. Here, he said, is a plain sheet. It has, of course, two sides. Can you imagine one that has not? Braildon stared at him in amazement. That's impossible. Ridiculous. But is it? Said Grail softly. He reached toward the cabinet again, and his fingers groped in its recesses. Then he drew out a long, flexible strip of paper and turned vacant eyes into the silently waiting Braildon. We cannot match the intellects of the First Dynasty, but what their minds could grasp directly we can approach by analogy. This simple trick, which seems so trivial, may help you glimpse the truth. He ran his fingers along the paper strip, then joined the two ends together to make a circular loop. Here I have a shape which is perfectly familiar to you, the section of a cylinder. I run my finger along the inside, so, and now along the outside. The two surfaces are quite distinct. You can go from one to the other only by moving through the thickness of the strip. Do you agree? Of course, Braildon, still puzzled, but what does it prove? Nothing. Now watch. The sun, Shervain thought, was Trilon's identical twin. The darkness had now lifted completely, and there was no longer the sensation which he would not try to understand of walking across an infinite plain. He was moving slowly now, for he had no desire to come to suddenly upon the vertiginous precipice. In a little while he could see a distant horizon of low hills as bare and lifeless as those he had left behind. This did not disappoint him unduly, for the first glimpse of his own land would be no more attractive than this. So he walked on, and when presently an icy hand fastened itself upon his heart, he did not pause as a man of lesser courage would have done. Without flinching, he watched that shockingly familiar landscape rise around him until he could see the plain from which his journey had started, and the great stairway itself, and at last Braildon's anxious, waiting face. Again, Grail brought the two ends of the strip together, but now he had given it a half twist. so that the band was kinked. He held it out to Braildon. "Run your finger along it now," he said quietly. Braildon did not do so. He could see the old man's meaning. "I understand," he said. "You no longer have two separate surfaces. It now forms a single continuous sheet, a one-sided surface, something that at first sight seems utterly impossible." "Yes," replied Grail very softly. "I thought you would understand. A one-sided surface. Perhaps you realize now why this symbol of the twisted loop is so common in the ancient religions, although its meaning has been completely lost. Of course, it is no more than a crude and simple analogy, an example in 2 dimensions of what must really occur in 3, but it is as near as our minds can ever get to the truth." There was a long, brooding silence. Then Grail sighed deeply and turned to Braildon, as if he could still see his face. "Why did you come back before Sylvain?" he asked, though he knew the answer well. "We had to do it," said Braildon sadly. "I did not wish to see my work destroyed." Grail nodded in sympathy. "I understand," he said. Sylvain ran his eye up the long flight of steps on which no feet would ever tread again. He felt few regrets. He had striven, and no one could have done more. Such victory as was possible had been his. Slowly he raised his hand and gave the signal. The wall swallowed the explosion as it had absorbed all other sounds, but the unhurried grace which the long tiers of masonry curtsied and fell was something he would remember all his life. For a moment he had a sudden, inexpressibly poignant vision of another stairway, watched by another Sylvain, falling in identical ruins on the far side of the wall. But that, he realized, was a foolish thought. For none knew better than he that the wall possessed no other side. That's a mind twister, is it not? Yeah, I love Arthur C. Clarke. He's dude was just amazingly talented. As far as he's very much, him and Isaac Asimov were very much talented in, conveying ideas that will just blow your mind. So good, so good. And they were never afraid to ask questions that, and it's just, yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. Definitely frazzled brain. If I were to do longer science fiction stories, I would love to do a book called Ubik by Philip K. Dick. It's one of those books that just, when you're done reading it, you put it down and you go, is this real? This messes you up. So, well, hello over there on the tube. The algorithm brought you here. Well, I am so glad that the algorithm brought you to me. I'm extremely happy to have you. I hope you follow, and I do this 4 nights a week. So, oh, Venus, I hope you feel better. I hope you feel better. I do too. I love books that force you to really examine things. And Philip K. Dick was very good at that. And one of my favorite books is the book that Blade Runner was based on, called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And that's an amazing, amazing book. Oh, good, Venus. I'm glad to hear that. I really am. Well, so we've got about 5 minutes left. And so I'm so glad that a lot of you got your Storytime with UndeadPapa merch, the t-shirts and everything. That's so cool. I mean, if you were here on Wednesday, you saw Tessa wearing her shirt, which is so wild to see. Like, somebody wearing UndeadPapa merch is just that just messes with my head, but I love it. I love it very much. So if you want one, please go to the link in my bio and get yours at the UndeadPapa Mercantile link. So, what else do I have going on? I am going to have more full-length audiobooks going up on the tubes. I'll let you guys know when that happens. I've got one that I've got about halfway through, and that'll be fun. It's Algernon Blackwood's The Empty House. We actually read that a few weeks ago on here, and everybody liked it. So I am looking forward to having that one out, and I'll be doing more stuff. I'll be doing some Edgar Allan Poe and stuff like that. So, yeah. So then Sunday we'll be starting the BFG, and that will go Sunday, Monday. Can you really truly be a Storytime goblin if you don't have a t-shirt? Just saying. But I can't complain because, yeah, no payments on the tubes. I can't really complain because I'm broke and I don't have a t-shirt. I don't have my own t-shirt yet. So yeah, I just dropped the last $200 into my checking account. I'm going, I gotta find a way to make more money. Some bills ain't getting paid this month, I can tell you that much. But that's okay. I mean, it's just, just got to keep moving forward like always. But yeah, so it's been a fun night. I'm glad you guys all joined me, and I appreciate it. Well, I hope you do too. And we can come back on Sunday and read more story. I'm like my brain is just bleh today. I don't know what it is. Oh man. It was a wild ride tonight, man. Timothy, I'm glad you were here. So I hope you come in on Sunday and experience another Roald Dahl story. But we have 16 new people that joined us. That's really awesome. For those of you that are new, I go live 4 nights a week. Sunday, Monday are kid-friendly books. Chapter books like The Phantom Tollbooth, Wind in the Willows, The Boxcar Children, The Borrowers. Basically, we did Bridge to Terabithia, which I'll never read again because that one hurt. Charlotte's Web, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, books like that. We did A Wrinkle in Time. Yes, that's correct. We also did The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Oh, yeah. I have neighbors that are shooting off fireworks, and I'm glad I don't have a live tomorrow night because it's just going to be fireworks all night. I might go live during the day though, just because I have recordings that I have to do, so I might just bring you guys along and watch me. You guys can watch me record if you want to. Yeah. And then I know where I was. Brain again. So probably tomorrow, but yes, Wizard of Oz, that whole event was just freaking fantastic and so much fun to do. We had 4 nights of Wizard of Oz, and that was a fun book to do because I was able to do a bunch of voices and stuff like that. But I also go live on Wednesdays and Fridays. Wednesdays and Fridays are more for science fiction, horror, fantasy type stuff. Generally more short stories. And yeah, those are fun as well. Now, each night I go live at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 p.m. Sometimes I go a little bit longer because we just get into the story and want to finish it. Or I end up talking too much and end up staying late. But yeah, so 4 nights a week: Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sunday, Monday are family friendly, and Wednesday and Friday are not. I guess, though every once in a while, like we did said that I believe it is. If not, I might have to go back in it, but I believe it's on. I believe it's there. You might have to go searching because I like talking to you guys too. So it's yeah. So I don't mind. That's part of what I love about this is because we get to talk about the stories. We get to just kind of chit chat, which is always good. But yeah, we did a week long event where I read Wizard of Oz on Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that was fun. I might do if we can get up to. Oh yeah, Towie. That is one of those things. I've got a profile up on Fiverr. I've got one up on Upwork. I have a couple of emails out to some production companies that do ad work and stuff like that. But I think my real bread and butter is going to come with audiobooks as that starts to get more and more. And this is honestly, I mean, I know I don't make a whole lot of money doing this, but I do, make a little bit. Yeah, Queen of Denial. I have. I mean, there's 14 books in the original Baum Wizard of Oz series. And we got to do the other Alice in Wonderland book because that was great last week to do. That was so much fun. I love doing that because the voices are so weird. And who doesn't love the Cheshire Cat? I mean, come on. We're all a little mad here. Yeah, the steamy book. I'll let you guys know when it comes out, and it'll be up on Audible, and you can go read that. But yeah, both of them are up there. They're public. Alice in Wonderland is public domain, so I can leave them up. I just don't have them labeled as what they are, so you might have to go search for them. I haven't had time to go back through and label them as to what stories they are. And some of the public domain stuff, I plan on going back through and re-recording them and adding, a little bit of music and some soundscaping, and actually putting them out as an official YouTube audiobook. Oh, wait a minute, I said YouTube. Oh my God, we love the TikTok shop. Can't say the tubes. Can't say the official name. I'll get in trouble. Sunday is going to be the BFG by Roald Dahl, the Big Friendly Giant. Freaking spell check, I'm telling you. I am forever telling people to go duck themselves. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done recently is all up on the tubes because it gets posted automatically up there, and I don't bother to go and take it down. The stuff that's not public domain, I probably should take down, but I don't. I'm of the mindset right now that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. But I'm also building up towards approaching some publishing companies for sponsorship, so I can, say, hey, this live is sponsored by Scholastic, and I mean, that would be so freaking cool. And then I can, be like, hey, Scholastic, has offered this deal. And because I know I have people that come in here and they listen to the stories that I read, and then they go out and buy the book. I've like literally had people come back the next day and be like, yeah, I went out and bought the book, which is awesome. But it also proves that, they could they could sell more books if they worked with me instead of against me. Oh, and it's absolutely something that eventually is going to happen. And then, there'll be eventually the live shows that are like in person live, that will still be streamed, because I'm not, I'll never keep the stories. You're welcome over on the tubes. But yeah, that would be fun to be able to, like, I think I've said this before, but going over to Liverpool to hang out with my youngest daughter, we could find a book, like a bookstore there, an independent bookstore, and he bought the yellow wallpaper. That is a fantastic. I love Stephen King and I love Chuck Palahniuk. Fight Club is a fantastic book. Not one I could probably read on live. So, oh, thank you, Nick. Traveling hijab girl is my sister. Show her some love. But yeah. So there's just a lot of things. I miss you too. Are you home? Yeah, I love reading Stephen King's short stuff. I just have to be careful with, because some of his stuff gets pretty crazy. There's him and Richard Matheson. There's some racial language and stuff like that I have to be careful with. Yay. Well, that's good. So yeah, it is 11:08, and I am going to call it a night. And yeah, that is a good one. Oh, cool. I have had listeners from Spain. Actually, and everybody else, a lot of know this if you've been here for a couple of weeks. I have been viewed in 30 countries around the world, including Romania, Kazakhstan, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines, all over. And I have been viewed on every single of the 7 continents, including Antarctica. I had a viewer from Scott Base, which is New Zealand's only research station down there. So I am worldwide. I am global. But if nothing else, at least I can impress my mom with it. I'm gonna get a map here to put up, so I'm gonna start putting the pins in. Me too. I'm glad you caught me. I just wanted to see my lives. So, oh, thank you, Towie. I'm hoping to get up to 10 superfans soon, and then we're just within spitting distance of 21,000 followers, which would be so cool. And then when we get to 25,000, I've got another design that's going to be going up in the shop that I think you guys will like. Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you all for spending a little time with me around the fire tonight. Join me on Sunday for Sunday Night Bedtime Stories as we begin the BFG by Roald Dahl, a story of dreams, friendship, and one very extraordinary giant who is not quite like the others. And if you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing and becoming a superfan, or visiting the UndeadPapa Mercantile. My Cash App and Venmo are both in my link tree. If you want to make a one-time donation, I would greatly appreciate it. Every bit of support helps keep the campfire lit. Because I love doing this. I love doing this for you guys. It brings me so much joy. Well, until Sunday, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody. And good night over there on the tubes. I appreciate you all. I'm sorry if I miss your comments sometimes, but I appreciate you guys just as much as anybody else. Have a good night.